gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We're now ready for takeoff.
Okay, I want to start off by saying all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah Kwadash. Double honours to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, pushing this word into the four corners of the earth. And Shalom to the hopeful elect scattered around the earth. Shalom to you. So today I am going to go into the speckled bird. Jeremiah 12:9 reads, "Mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird." Okay, this the heritage of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. The birds round about her are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour. So, when we look up the word speckled, which is the heritage of the Most High, we see the description here covered or marked with a large number of small spots or patches of colour. Okay, and that's what the heritage of the Most High, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, is. It's covered in patches of colour, and these patches of colour represent the way that Israelites today look. Okay, so you have the 12 tribes across the North and South America, starting with Judah, the tribe of Judah in Babylon the Great, and so on and so forth. And then you have a number of Israelites, chosen seed, scattered around the earth, who look like the other nations, that have been living in amongst the other nations for a long time and been taking wives of those other nations, which is why eventually those seeds of Jacob look like the other nations. And today I'm going to go into the particular patches of colour that look like Afghanistanis. Okay, so over the last week to 2 weeks, you've seen a lot of news regarding Afghanistan and a lot of things that have been going on, and a lot of people have brought out videos regarding what Esau's up to and his old tricks. But the real reason, which is what I'm going to go into today, the real reason behind what's going on, Esau constantly going over there and creating problems in that particular land, I'm going to go into that and explain to you that those people, there are a lot of descendants of Jake out there. Okay, so as usual, as I explained before, once you go around the earth looking for Israelites today through the Spirit, and the first thing you have to always do is to take into account Deuteronomy chapter 28:15 on down, consequences of disobedience. Okay, so this is always going to be your first port of call, and you follow this guideline, which will then direct you towards where you will find Israelites. And especially 28:63, as it says here, "And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked from the land whither thou goest to possess it. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all the people, from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." Okay, so this is what we're going to go into. We're going to go into the seed of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, scattered through among all people from one end of the earth to the other, serving other gods. And we're going to concentrate on those that have been scattered into the land that we call Afghanistan. Carry on here, 28:65, "And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, and falling of eyes, and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life." Okay, so this is quite clear. When you're out there today in this modern day, and you're even if you're watching through TV or media, and you're trying to identify where these Israelites are scattered and where they are, where you know who you're looking at. You want to look at a set of people, and you want to try and work out, are these a part of the other nations? Are they Israelites? Are they Edomites? And this chapter is key, and I've gone into it before to explain it. And when you break it down here in 28:66, and thy life shall hang in doubt before thee. So this is going to be something that is common in amongst the seed of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob today. And thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life. Okay, so when you go into Afghanistan today, there are a lot of people living according to these curses. Quite obvious, quite blatant. And as you're seeing here, this is an Afghanistani family, and this occurrence is quite a common occurrence. So it's quite obvious that this is somewhere we need to look at to try and identify Jake, which is what I've done today, and I'm going to bring this information out for you. Okay, so this was based around watching the brother GMS Vegas sit downs 144 bar. I think this is about a week ago. And this brother brought out this particular social media post, shall we say. And I'm not really a social media person myself, but he brought out this particular post from this Afghani woman. And I'm going to read it to you because this is pretty much the basis of my lesson today. The information I'm going to bring out pretty much relates to what this lady's saying. She's pretty much hitting it on the head. She's hitting it right on the nail on the head. And obviously I'm going to take it to a slightly deeper level to explain to you how these people are descendants of Jake. Okay, so reading this thing here, it says here, I am an Afghan woman. My family fled the US-backed proxy war against the Soviet Union. You have been told it's a civil war. We Afghans have killed each other, but mainly on the bankroll of foreign governments who divide to conquer, okay, which is going to be key in what I'm going to explain to you. The Afghanistan you see today has its roots in the British occupation of India, exacerbated by the USSR and USA. Regional powers like Pakistan, Iran, China, and Gulf Arab states have all conspired with imperialists to reach their hands under my land for its resources, which is what modern day Jake is living under. He's living under oppression from the Edomites, which are named here in the British, USSR and USA mainly. And then she goes on to say regional powers like Pakistan, Iran, China and Gulf Arab states have all conspired with the imperialists to reach their hands under the land. So this is the other nations working together with Esau to come against Jake. So there's your first clue in what she's saying right there. This is quite clearly consequences of disobedience that the scriptures explain to us. These type of things are going to be happening to us in these times. And so she goes on to say 3 trillion worth. Your pharmaceutical companies bet on us too. 80% of the world's opium is Afghan grown. Ironic, you believe we are the ones dependent on you. People from my region do not live in a post-colonial world, like we do. We exist within the legacies that empires leave behind. We come clawing to your shores, through these boats and this illegal immigration that they do, and they have to do. They have no choice but to get on a little boat and try and cross a huge sea. And in the UK, when you watch the news, you see a lot of these immigrants arrive on the beach and the boat's smashed up to pieces, long gone. And you think to yourself, how did 4 people just rolling up on a beach? So she's not exaggerating when she says that, but getting back to it, we come clawing to your shores where we are told we don't belong. But we're very familiar with you. We've seen the name of your countries everywhere, on the side of Humvees, on the propaganda leaflets, dropped from jets, in the mouths of women your soldiers raped. Okay, so everything she says here is key to what I'm going to explain to you today. To break it down, what's happening here is, like I'm saying to you, the people of Afghanistan, there's a lot of Jakes mixed in there. There's other nations. There's Ishmaelites mixed in there, and probably Elamites mixed in there as well. But there's a lot of Jakes in that particular area, which is why they suffer all these particular problems, which can be taken back to what the Bible is telling us what our life as a Jake is going to be like in this modern day. So to explain to you how Jake arrived in this particular part of the land, I have to take you back to a previous video that I made, and you might remember I brought out a video explaining how the people of the Punjab are descendants of Jake, and how they arrived there and pretty much set up shop in the land of Punjab. Okay, so this is going to be key to what I'm explaining today. As you can see here, you have a so-called Sikh from Kenya and a so-called Sikh from India, and these guys pretty much have the same bloodline going back, and this goes back to Israel. And I explained before, I'm just going through it quite briefly, just in case, just to give you a quick reminder. But if you want more detail on this, you can go further down the channel, go along my channel and go further down. I think it was around May, I put out a video regarding the scattered seed in India. So you'll be able to find that, and it'll give you a lot more detail. But right now I'm just brushing you up on how Jake came from the east coast of Africa to the Indian subcontinent through slave ships. The same way Jake went from the west coast over to North and South America and Europe. Okay, so, and as you can see here, these guys then arrived and set up shop in an area called the Punjab. And Jake wasn't just brought to that particular area, he was also brought to, anywhere there was a shipping port, if you like. These were where the slaves were brought into. And this is why eventually the British East India Company went over to these particular places to annex them. And eventually they did annex the Punjab, which is where the Sindh is. They did eventually annex that particular area. And again, the reason is to go in where Jake is and divide and conquer it, just like they're doing in Afghanistan. So I'm going to get into it a little bit further now. So again, going back to the people of the Punjab, who came from Kenya, who came from Israel, the bloodline, the seed of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. And these guys ended up here, like I've just explained, in an area called Punjab. And as you can see, this is after the British Esau has come along and annexed the area and caused a lot of problems. As you can see down here, you can see routes of migration. People had to migrate. Once Esau came and divided and conquered the land and left, he pretty much caused all these people to travel these different routes and to pick up route and move land. So before we get into it further, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to explain to you, well, I've just explained that Jake arrived in the Punjab, and now we're going to explain how Jake made it from the Punjab to Afghanistan. But the first thing you need to understand is that when the slave trade era took place, there was quite a big difference in which area you were taken as a slave. Okay, so if you were sold as a slave into an Edomite nation, to where the Edomites were, for example, North and South America, Edomites had gone there, set up shop, and then slaves were being sold to them to help them build up the land and whatever they were doing. And so one clear distinction is that if you went into slavery under Edomites, he pretty much did it the old-fashioned way. And he put you under, lock and key, the yoke and the chain, and he gave you the spade and sent you to work in the field. So Esau did it in the old-fashioned way, and that's because Esau really understood who we were, and he feared it the most. So that's why he was moving like that. But on the other side, when you got sold into slavery into the eastern part of the world, over to the Indian subcontinent and to Asia, the Far East, you were seen differently. Okay, so just like today, You know, if you want to have a spiritual conversation, obviously your best person to do is pick a Jake. But if you try to pick a Edomite to have a spiritual conversation, you're going to struggle. If you pick somebody of the other nations to have a spiritual conversation, they might not get it like Jake gets it, but they'll get it to a certain degree. They have a little bit of understanding, more than Esau does. That's why Esau is base man. He's a base man, basically, bottom of the pile. And so when Jake got sold into slavery, into the eastern part of the world, these other nations saw something in us. You know, they saw a skill, the ability to do something well, expertise, or it says down here, a particular ability. So they saw this and they appreciated it. So the slavery wasn't so harsh as it was under the Edomites. It was slightly softer in that, you know, you were still made to be, you know, servants and handmaids, and you were still put out to battle, you know, because obviously if you're going to go out to fight, soldiers might die. So what you're going to do, you use your slaves and put them out into battle and say, well, you make up the front line and we'll come in behind you. But what these guys did do in the eastern side of the earth, they recognized the skill when they bought us as slaves. And I looked up the word skill, goes back to discernment and knowledge. And this is what they recognized in us. And that's why when you go over to the eastern side of the earth and you look at Jake through slavery, you know, Jake was sometimes treated well if he showed that he had particular skill and particular ability. You know, just like the first, the so-called African samurai, which is actually an Israelite. You know, this guy was shown favor. And this is the difference, you see. When you went into slavery under Esau, he just straight locked you up, put the yoke, chain, blah, 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 ball and chain, spade, go to the field and work. But like I say, when you went into the other side, they recognized they were slightly more spiritual people. So they weren't as harsh as Esau, which is why later on down the line, when you actually check it, later on down the line, when Esau set up shop in Europe and North and South America, and he had everything running properly, when he actually, a couple hundred years later, he actually looked back over to the eastern side of the earth and he realized Jake was getting an easy ride. That's why eventually these East British India Company and all these other guys came and annexed all these different lands. They said, hang on a minute, Jake's having a good time over there. The slavery ain't as bad over there. They ain't really treating them like we're treating them. And that's why eventually they, you know, the Rule Britannia built a couple of ships and went around the earth. And everywhere they found a bunch of Jakes, they annexed it, divided up the land and messed them up. This is what they've done in the Punjab, which is what they're doing in Afghanistan now, and so on and so forth. But this is a point you need to remember, because when you look now at the history of the Indian subcontinent, okay, the Mongol Empire launched several invasions into the Indian subcontinent from 1221 to 1327, with many of the later raids made by the Coronas, sorry if my pronunciation is wrong, of Mongol origin. The Mongols occupied parts of the subcontinent for decades. As the Mongols progressed into the Indian hinterland and reached the outskirts of Delhi, the Delhi Sultanate led a campaign against them in which the Mongol army suffered serious defeats. Okay, so this Delhi Sultanate army pretty much started off with Elamites, you know, East Indians, and with a Hindu religion. But what they were doing, they were buying in Jakes as slaves. And when you look at the East Indian, you know, when you look at the stature of an East Indian, a Hindu person, if you like, they got a particular stature, which is not exactly some, you know, sportsman-like, shall we say. But when you look at the average Jake, who in that particular area came under the banner of Sikh, wherever he picked that up from, there's quite a clear difference in physical stature. Okay, so when you're buying in slaves of this particular stature, you're going to then put them into war. you're going to say, well, look, here's a sword. You need to come and help us. And that's how basically, when you go through the history, that's how this Delhi Sultane led a campaign against them, in which the Mongol army suffered serious defeats. This is what was going on. Jake was in the mix all of a sudden. But Jake came with that warrior spirit, and he weren't having it. I mean, look at these guys. These are Jakes. You can't tell me that these aren't Jakes. And look at this guy. If you bought this guy as a slave, you'd say, do you know what, bruv? Here's a sword. Come and fight with me. And when you read up on the Maratha Empire, or the Maratha Confederacy, which was a power that dominated a large portion of the Indian subcontinent in the 18th century, the empire formally existed from 1674 with the coronation of Shivaji and the Chhatrapati, and ended in 1818 with the defeat of Peshwa Bajirao at the hands of the British East India Company. See, this when Esau realised what's going on, he said, hang on a minute, you're giving these slaves swords and you're getting them to fight with you, you're getting them to do whatever. And these Edomites were like, no, we're not having that. You should have them in lock and key like we have them. So then they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create the British East India Company. And they came on the command of the English king to say, well, we're coming over to set up shop. How can you come from another country with a contract from your king? Say, we come to do this work. That's pretty much what they did. So we're coming to take over your land and set up shop like this. And for what reason? Well, we have this contract from our king. It says here the Marathas are credited to a large extent for ending Mughal rule over most of the Indian subcontinent, okay? Which is quite important to realise how Jake made it to Afghanistan. Okay, so like I said, you got these East Indians fighting against this Mongol Empire, and they took on Jake, these warriors, and eventually they defeated this Mongol army. And again, then what happened? You see, when you take a bunch of Jakes like this and you give them swords and you got them fighting with you, eventually they gain stature and they gain a presence. And when they build themselves up in numbers, all of a sudden they can start demanding things. And what they eventually did is they set up shop in this particular area called the Punjab. Okay, so this is what they did. This is their particular area now. They've come along. They've been brought into the land of India. They're living with these Elamites. They're fighting with them against this Mongol Empire. And when everything's starting to relax and they're cool, they're going, do you know what? We're going to call this particular part of the land our land, and we're going to live here. We're going to do our thing. Okay? And again, this is why, later on down the line, when Esau looked back at the eastern side of the earth, he was like, hang on a minute, what are you doing? You've let these Israelites set up shop. And to fulfill prophecy, Esau's made his way back over to the eastern side of the earth and said, no, you need to divide and conquer this land. That's why he had to do it. But where he had the Israelites in slavery on his side of the earth, he got them under lock and key, so he weren't worried about dividing and conquering and all these other things. With America, he just went in there, shut up Gad, and gave them measles or whatever else it was, got rid of them pretty much, and then just set up shop. There was nothing to divide and conquer. But like I say, once they'd done that and they looked back over to the slaves they'd sold in the east, they were like, you are giving these guys land and swords, what's going on? So that's why they had to come back over and divide and conquer. So that's eventually what happened. But in the meantime, in between time, before they arrived, these Jakes that were calling themselves Sikhs, that had that warrior mentality, decided to go on a rampage. And so what they did, they started to increase their area, the size of their area. They said, you know what? That whole coming over as slaves, and then being given swords, then fighting, then being the ones in the battles that are actually making the difference. People are then looking at you like you're superstars, because back in the days, those superstars was the man that could chop up as many people with a sword, not someone that could pick up a mic. So when you were doing that, you were gaining stature. And like I say, eventually they said, look, this is our land now, you leave us alone, and we won't cause you no trouble. And everybody's gone, oh, do you know what, just leave them to it. And then after a while they said, actually, we're going to make our land bigger, which is what they wanted to do. And so eventually they stretched all the way to the border of Afghanistan. And that then caused the Afghan-Sikh Wars, which were a series of wars between the Islamic Durrani Empire, centered in present-day Afghanistan, and the Sikh Empire, located in the Punjab region. The conflict had its origins stemming from the days of Dal Khalsa. So this is what happened. They went to war. These Jakes that came over on ships have ended up, before Esau's come back to really just put them into slavery again and mess them up, should we say. But in that time, they've managed to just create this big area for themselves, and they're trying to take people over, mainly Afghanistan. And when you type into Google who won the Afghanistan war, Sikh, well, that's not exactly, I don't know how they've written it like that, but anyway, it tells you here Hari Singh Nawala, and his allegiance was the Sikh Empire. So that's quite clearly telling you that the Afghani-Sikh war was won by Sikhs. Okay, so just like this lady explained here, what did she say at the bottom? When people invade, what happens? Your women get raped. So what do you think happened in Kabul when Jake arrived and he weren't having it? What do you think these Jakes did? What do you think when they arrived in Kabul? What do you think they did? They raped the women. And when they raped the women, they left their seed there. Just like you would. Now, you may not stick around with that woman, but that woman's had that child. That child may grow up thinking he's Muslim because his mum's teaching him that, or instead of that Sikh thing that you got from Jake, but really none of them are the truth. But you're still of the seed. And that's why today you will get Sikhs, born in Kabul, 1969. And this looks like a straight up Israelite. He's got the beard, he's got the turban, the meat tree. I mean, what else? So Jake is out there. And you can even look it up in history. You got the Afghan Sikhs. So this is pretty much an Afghanistan living the way of a Sikh. But really, it just boils down to you're Jake. But they just don't realise that. They just got all these man-made traditions going on, and they're fighting over it, which makes it even worse. So, and another thing I wanted to point out is what you'll notice as well is with the Afghani turban, it becomes more rounded. When you go back to the Sikhs, it becomes more of a mitra shape, that 90-degree angle. But when you go to Afghanistan, it becomes more like a hat. And these dudes ain't growing their hair, which these dudes do. But really, this is just the seed of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob going through the motions, worshipping other false idols, false gods, and picking up man-made traditions. And just to show you what's going on in Afghanistan, you've even got the Muslim dude in the back, if you can see him with his little hat on. And so this is what's going on. They're all intermingled, just like they're intermingled in the Punjab. And what it is a lot of these guys are Jakes, just arguing over religion. And then some of them might call themselves different nationalities according to the new borders that have been created. But what does that mean? That means nothing. Really, that means nothing. But this is what it is. You see, Jake arrived in India and pretty much strolled all the way up to Kabul and took it over with ease. When you go into it, they took it over with ease. Not like the way Babylon the Great tried to go over there and made a big hash of it. They tried to go over there, took their big jets and all this stuff. They got there, they found a whole bunch of caves. They didn't know where to start. But you see, these Jakes, when they went over, they had that spirit on them, that warrior spirit. They're not having it. That spirit of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. When, don't forget, these wars are all to contain everything for what's going on in future prophecy. If that Mongol Empire had carried on to do what it wanted to do and take over that Indian subcontinent, then you would lose some of the history that we have, which is actually the prophecy to take place. so things wouldn't work out the way they had. So to keep everything in check, to keep the level of population in particular areas in check, Yahweh B'Hashem Yahweh Shai creates wars, and he will use certain groups of people to stand up and fight back and stop an insurgence or hold it back for a minute. And these people, these Jakes in the Punjab are no different, basically. But like I say, when you go over to Afghanistan, you have a lot of Jakes that take on the Muslim religion, a lot of them that take on the Sikh religion, Afghani Sikhs. And all it is it's no different from black on black crime in Babylon the Great. In Babylon the Great, you got Jake shooting each other over like a pair of trainers, for a pair of shoes or whatever. And that's just, then the Edomites go, well, it's black on black crime. Well, the same thing is going on in Afghanistan. It's just that they're not black. They're not so-called black. But they're still Israelites. And they're still suffering the same curses. And they're still popping each other. This time they're popping each other over religion, not over trainers. Do you see what I mean? This is what it comes down to. So as you can see at the bottom here, it says Taliban says it will punish kidnappers of Afghan Sikhs and denies the role. But who else in the country has power to be snatching people off the road? You tell me that. So, it's quite clear this is Jake on Jake crime, should we say. But when you look into it, you can see here April the 8th, August the 10th and August the 15th. The Taliban are currently on the rampage and they're trying to take everything over. And when you look into the history, what you will find is that initially the Taliban, who are militants, Muslim but militants, at one particular point they had their own particular area. And just like everybody else, all they ever say is, you just leave us with this area and we'll be fine. You, the rest of you Afghanistanis, do what you want. This is our area. We do what we want inside this area. This is all anybody ever wants. But then what happens? Esau comes along, divides the land, conquers it. And then all of a sudden now you're split up, you're divided, you've got people everywhere. And when they did that in Afghanistan, the people, out of the Afghani Sikhs, the Taliban, the Afghani militant Muslims, and the normal Afghanistans, which are just Muslim but not militants, you've got three groups. And who's gaining power after Esau's coming in and splitting the land? The militants, the ones with the guns, the ones who have the ability to snatch people off the road. And since then, they've even gone on to destroy a lot of the paganistic statues in around that particular area, namely Nimrod. And they've gone around smashing up these things. And this is it's that warrior spirit, that aggression. And what it also boils down to is that revolting spirit, the spirit of revolt, the spirit of revolution. Okay, so like when you read it in the Maccabees and you're reading about that spirit of revolt, and then you're now sitting here today in 2021 and you're looking around the earth and you're looking at all these Jakes scattered around the earth. Which one of these Jakes has got the spirit of the Maccabees on them, the spirit of revolt? It's these guys down here in the Middle East. They have the spirit of revolt. That's why, when you look at Jake in Babylon the Great, those Jakes have been pacified. These 2/3, you've been pacified by Esau. Esau gave you a dummy in the form of hip hop, in the form of clothing, fashion, in the form of entertainment and being a party person and whatever else it is, just having a good time. Esau pacified the Jakes in Babylon the Great with that. And that's why they can get away with what they get away with. But you see, it's a little bit more difficult in the Middle East because these Jakes have that spirit of revolt. They're not having it. They may not know the truth. And they've got all these man-made traditions. You don't even know which religion you're going to get when you meet one of them. But it's all boils down to that spirit of revolt. And again, these guys have been going around now lately in the last 10, 15 years or so. They've been going around smashing up these paganistic idols and statues. You can see here the ancient city of Palmyra in Syria, destroyed by ISIS in 2015. The Buddhas of Bamiyan in Afghanistan have also been destroyed. They pretty much took a bomb, lit it up, said F that. And as it says here, blessings of obedience, Leviticus 26:1 reads, "Ye shall make you no idols, nor graven image, neither rear you up a standing image, neither shall ye set up any image of your stone in your land to bow down unto it. For I am the Lord your God, Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai." And this is what it is, you see, that even though these Jakes don't know the truth, they've got that spirit to go on them and destroy these. They're doing the revolting, the revolution aspect of it. These Jakes out in Babylon the Great, they wouldn't know what a revolution is if it hit them in the face. So moving on now, so I did a little bit more research and I came across this website, which was pretty shocked to find, if I'm honest. And it says here, Muslim Bani Israel, which even now it makes me laugh. I mean, I had to laugh. But when you read here, it's at the bottom, it says Afghan names of Hebrew and biblical origin. So we have to go into this. And I'm only going to read a little bit. I'll try and put the link up in the description box if I remember. And you can have a look for it yourself. I mean, there's a lot more information than I'm going to bring out, but I'm just bringing out quick bits for you to see what's going on. So reading here, it says Afghans, more precisely Pashtuns, are descendants of the Assyrian exile from ancient Israel, thus called the Bani Israel, or the children of Israel. This is a basic statement that is ubiquitously observed from texts, scrolls and books from as far back as Herodotus in the 5th century BC to internet articles to today. Some of these claims are absurd and laughable. For example, Afghans are Bani Israel because Lex Luger, an American wrestler, and the Afghan province of Logar sound familiar. I don't even know why they've mentioned that, because when you go on to read further, it wasn't even point. It's like they tried to be funny with it, but I don't really get it. Anyway, but on the other hand, the multitude of places, names, facts, rituals, customs, and ancient references from Morocco to Ceylon collectively point towards an undeniable plausibility. Okay, in short, any of these facts viewed separately can be the result of random occurrences. More likely, however, from their sheer number, existence within the concise narrow region, references from the cultures around them, and their own oral and written history indicates towards an often overlooked mystery of human history. The Afghans, or more precisely, the Paktuik within the Kalani tribes, are most probably the children of the Assyrian exile that never repatriated with their homeland. In a region marred by continuous warfare between the countless civilizations, it is not surprising that the most lasting history of the Afghans is their own oral traditions, carefully preserved from father to son like echoes of the past. Many sources have different conclusions as to what happened to the Assyrian exiles after their flight out of Israel and centuries of captivity. All are conflicting. The more reliable point to a general migration, towards modern-day Afghanistan, others towards the south of the Caspian, the Caucasus, southeastern Europe. Some stretch the imagination as far as modern-day Germany and even to the depths of Africa. Now this is key, a point to remember here is that these exiles were treated even less than slaves as rebels. Okay, and this is what I just said to you. These have the spirit of rebellion, but not rebellion in a childish way, rebellion in the way that they want to create a revolution. Okay, so these exiles were treated even less than slaves, as rebels, deprived of basic citizenship and education. The mere adherence to their old religion was considered an act of treason. Israel monotheism was a great hearsay to the ancient Assyrians. Also, only a small fraction of this exile living in the western parts of the empire ever relocated back to Israel, and that too, after years of struggle, went badly for the Assyrians. The major part of the exile, however, was exiled to the furthest reaches of the empire, to the mountains beyond the western Media, which is modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan. Okay, so you can see that Jake is out there, and they have a history. When did you ever think that Afghanistan would have even a trace of Hebrew history in there? But they have it. So they've picked it up from somewhere. They've picked it up from their origins. But like I keep saying to you, like these Jakes in India, like these Jakes in Babylon the Great, like these Jakes in Europe, they've all picked up these man-made traditions. They've all picked up these religions and whatever they learnt, and they've added it to it, and they've twisted it all into whatever we apparently individually believe. So, and again, that spirit of revolt. And I'm going to break this down because, while I was talking about this particular area, I thought I'd bring up this particular point as well at the same time. On April the 10th, 2003, the first looters broke into the National Museum of Iraq. Staff had vacated 2 days earlier, ahead of the advance of US forces on Baghdad. Okay, so you may remember in 2003, Babylon the Great rolled into Baghdad and to deal with Saddam Hussein pretty much, and the looters broke into the National Museum. Now this article here is from 2018. It says here, it's disturbingly easy to buy Iraq's archaeological treasures. US forces invaded the country 15 years ago this week, that was from 2018, and left behind a booming trade in looted artifacts. This is the story of the Lady of Waqar. Okay, so they're just going to talk about this statue real quickly. And again, if you understand what iconoclasm is, then you will see a great example of it right here. This statue was probably of a so-called black person, somebody with colour, melanin in their skin. And the reason why they break the nose off is for you not to realise that. And then you could now mistake this for an Edomite, because this is pretty much an Edomite trait, to go around breaking off the noses of statues. Iconoclasm, if you don't know, you have to look it up. But getting back to it, this is the story of the Lady of Waqar, also known as the Mona Lisa of Mesopotamia, a priceless Sumerian artifact dating back to 3100 BC. It's the earliest known representation of the human face. It was looted from the museum in Baghdad, along with 15,000 other antiquities, in the chaotic aftermath of the US invasion of Iraq. Soon after, a tip from an Iraqi informant led American and Iraqi investigators to raid a nearby farm. They found the Lady of Waqar intact. In September 2003, it was returned to the museum. So they found it intact. That means that damage happened way before, when Esau arrived. But getting back to it, other artifacts have not been as lucky. 15 years after US forces toppled Saddam Hussein, ushering in a period of instability that led to the plunder of the museum while ignoring pleas to secure the building. Some 7,000 looted items have been returned, but 8,000 are still out there. Okay, so what you have here is you have Babylon the Great. This is how I'm going to break it down to you. You have Babylon the Great going down to original Babylon, taking over the country, securing all the government buildings, but all of a sudden they woke up the next day and they're still occupying this place, and they said, actually, stand at ease, stand down from the museum, let them loot it. So why did Babylon the Great do that in Babylon? Why did that happen? Because Babylon the Great went into the museum and took what artifacts they wanted. Okay? And then, when he left, he thought, well, this is a bit obvious. I went into this museum, our soldiers guarding it, protecting it, and we've taken 3 or 4 things that we really wanted, whatever particular artifacts they got to use for their left hand divination, who knows. But they went in there and took something. And when they turned around and said, well, you know what, people are going to work out what we've done, how should we cover our tracks? What did Esau do? He went back to order out of chaos. He said, well, get the soldiers to stand down, let the locals loot it, and there's your chaos. And then the order will be that nobody knows what we've done. And so they took back artifacts. Babylon the Great went to Babylon and raided the museum, took what they wanted, first picks, sent the soldiers in, picked those bits initially, and when they got what they want, they opened the doors to the general public. And that general public, again, which has Jakes in there, they ran up into that museum and pretty much smashed everything they could find. Because again, it goes back to iconoclasm. Some of it got stolen to be sold, and a lot of it got smashed because they understood the paganism that it goes back to. Okay, that spirit of rebellion. They're not having it. Okay, in Ezekiel 2:8 reads, but thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat that I give thee. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. And what do you think that book is? That book is this Bible. And that's what we're telling you. We're telling you to take this book and eat it, absorb it, understand it, digest it, and speak it back. Because when you go to these scriptures and you read them properly and you apply them to history, like I just did, you will then understand where to find the scattered seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's not a difficult thing. I mean, I've just walked you through the pathway. You can now run off and research what you want if you're really into that. But that's all it takes. It's not difficult. But that was, the scattered seed in Afghanistan. And that's why these problems, going back to what this lady said, we keep being told they're civil wars, but they're going over there. Babylon the Great are going over there to divide and conquer. She's telling you straight. And, the whole, what they do, what Esau will do is he'll always go in and say, it's for this, it's for that. Yeah, there's resources in the land. So they take the oil and they take whatever they can. They create a political reason. They say, well, it's a bit of an unstable country, so we're going to go in and just secure it all. And while they're there, they'll raid the resources, take a bit of oil, take a bit of opium, take whatever they can get their hands on, take a few artifacts out of the museum. And when they leave, what do? They leave it in a mess. You're looking at Afghanistan today with all these problems. That's just exactly what they did to the Punjab. And these areas, the pattern of behaviour is that Esau keeps turning up where Israelites are and divided and conquer. Why? Because when we went into the slave trade and you went over to the Western Hemisphere, they put you in lock and key. But when you went over to the Eastern Hemisphere, they looked at you and they said, no, this man's got a skill. Let's give him something. Let's give him something to do. And when Esau clocked that, he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create this Rule Britannia thing, and we're going to go and shut that down, shut that whole Israelite thing down. Where they found out where they're located. Okay, some of them are in Afghanistan, some of them are in Punjab. Let's go and shut it down. And see what it is. You see, this, we're telling you this truth, and you've got the whole world out here to say, nah, these guys are making it up. They don't know what they're talking about. But I'm giving you the reasons why all these mini wars are taking place, and it's quite clear. And no one else can give you these. Where else do you go and you get a link up for all these things that are going on? This happened, that happened. You've got these wars going on. These people get taken over. When you come to this truth, we'll break it all down for you. We'll take this history, we'll apply it to the scriptures, and we'll break it down. And like I say, when I read this particular statement here from this lady, she hit it on the head. So, Lord willing, you followed what I was saying, and you understood that, and you were edified. And until next time, I'm going to say all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah, Quadash, and Shalom.